Yo, what's up, folks? This Impact, and I want to take this time to welcome you back to the Hurt Business 101. Let's get right into this video, man. Today's video, I want to address a fight that is a rematch that I'm not really looking forward to, but I will support the fight because I want to see the sport of boxing grow, and I still want to ensure that I support the fighters that are willing to get in the ring, give us everything, win, lose, or draw, and leave it all out on the line, and that is the rematch between Terence Bud Crawford and Errol the Truth Spence Jr. Let's get right into it. Listen, a lot of people have their theories on what happened in the fight, why the fight went this way, why the fight went that way. Weight drain, car crashes, rabbit punches. I've heard PEDs. I've heard all of these theories. I don't live in a world where all of these theories and excuses mean anything. One thing we know is those two guys met in the ring for the fight that we all were waiting for. And Terence Crawford won in a one-sided dominant fashion. That's what we know. All the other stuff is speculating and fandom taking over, and when people are confused and don't understand why something went totally different than what they thought, it's just natural defenses for a lot of people to try to figure out. They have to figure it out and say, well, something had to be wrong for this to go so terribly one-sided. Sometimes, guys, styles just make fights. Just because something is viewed as a 50-50 fight does not mean it's dead even. That just means both guys, the level that they're at, what we've seen from both of the guys, the level of opposition they faced, the status of both guys, and overall perception of the fight is 50-50. But I've always understood that Terence Crawford had a skill set that will be very, very challenging for Spence to deal with. And that's just the reality of the situation. I've been picking him to win this fight for years. I get predictions wrong like everybody else. But this fight, I've always believed Terence Crawford's skill set would be a little bit too much for him to deal with. And it's just based on styles. Based on the style. I know they both tough guys. They both dogs. It's just a stylistic nightmare for the guy. And I believe that this fight was a lot closer as far as how it was going to play out. I believed that Errol Spence Jr.'s pressure would be able to cause Crawford some issues before he actually adjusted to it and was able to take over. I never imagined that he would come out the way he came out. That just goes to show you that he really wanted that, and he rose to a different height for that fight. He had something to prove. But let's break down what I believe is going to happen in the second fight. And I'm going to break that down based off of a lot of things that I've heard from other people, because I'm here to bring my perspective to some of these things that I hear. And one of the things I hear is Errol Spence can switch it up by boxing Terence on the outside instead of coming in and bringing all of that pressure so that he won't get countered, which on his face sounds legit. However, a lot of people basing all of that standing on the outside and boxing stuff on his performance against Mikey Garcia. I hear it and I saw that performance. But the thing is, against Mikey Garcia, Errol Spence, because everyone is saying that Errol Spence has been at 147 for a long time, which he has, okay? And saying that he really should be fighting at a higher weight class, which I believe at this point he should be a 154 pounder. Okay, he stuck around to collect all the belts, and I admire him for it. But he really should be at about 154 right now. Mikey Garcia is legitimately a 135 fighter. He's a lightweight. He should have never really been trying to compete at 140. he just has enough punching power and enough skills to be able to fight at 140. He's not even a 147 pounder. It's just a certain level of guy he's going to be able to beat just because he has an experience level and he was a really good fighter. So he's going to be able to beat some guys at the weight class. Doesn't mean he belongs there. So Errol Spence is able to box on the outside against him because he can control the range with his reach, right? Mikey Garcia is smaller than Errol Spence Jr. He has shorter arms, and on top of that, he is a Mexican fighter that has flat feet. Okay, Mikey can move around a little bit better than your average Mexican fighter, but he still has slow feet, and he doesn't have the size or the strength to work his way around Errol Spence when Errol Spence is trying to use his long jab and his reach and his length to keep him on the outside. So Mikey Garcia can't close the distance on Errol because every time he tries to close the distance, Errol can sit down on a shot and remind him that, hey, you got to be wary of trying to come in here with that stuff. Now, unlike a Robert Easter Jr. that, might try that, and Mikey can kind of get past him because he doesn't have the physical strength to keep Mikey out. So Mikey had to worry about the length, the natural size, and the power. So he can't, make up for the fact that Errol Spence is the longer, naturally bigger guy. He doesn't have the attributes. Also, Mikey isn't the quickest guy. Mikey isn't the best counter puncher, and he doesn't have the quick twitch. He has good timing, but he doesn't have the quick twitch necessary to deal with a guy when he's undersized like that. You know what I'm saying? Undersized and outgunned is too much. So, against Terence Crawford, if Spence was to try to fight from the outside, I mean, just look at this. Okay, from the outside, trying to control the fight with his jab. That's not going to work against Terence Crawford. First of all, Terence Crawford is going to be fighting as a southpaw just like him. So he does have, they both have a clear path to land their jabs. But as we saw in the first fight, Terence Crawford's jab was also beating Errol to the punch because Terence Crawford has a longer reach and Terence Crawford does have quicker hands and better timing. So trying to fight jab for jab to control the range against Terence Crawford isn't going to work. Also, Crawford can counter the jab with shots. See, if Errol is throwing that right hand jab, Terence is fighting in a southpaw stance. So Errol has to be wary of getting countered over his jab with those straight left hands coming from Terence Crawford. So that will limit his jab use. And that's the reason why he didn't use the jab as much in his last fight, because he figured out those quick left hand counters were coming over top of his jab because of Terence Crawford's reflexes. Secondly, he fighting on the outside against Terence Crawford also spelled disaster because you don't want to let Crawford gain forward momentum. Because if he's countering your jab, he has fast enough feet to slip things and close the distance on you. He's physically strong enough, which we've seen him pushing and throwing Errol Spence out of clinches. He's physically strong enough to be able to deal with the mauling tactics, right? He's physically strong enough. Then in close, he's good enough countering on the inside that even in tight, he can get shots in between Errol's punches. Another point is I've heard people say Errol could just box him and fight off the back foot. Well, Errol Spence never has fought off the back foot. He doesn't have that type of footwork to fight off the fighting off the back foot. You have to be fleet of foot, really, if you want to fight like that. You have to have really good control and good foot speed and great foot movement. Now, he's a person that has proper foot spacing, but generally that's when he's standing still or he's moving forward. Going backwards, you need a different type of footwork to be able to keep the balance and have your wherewithal to understand where you're at in the ring at all times moving off the back foot. He's not accustomed to fighting off the back foot, so he's not used to doing that like a Lamont Peterson or, guys like a Floyd and guys that are able to move going backwards and still be aware of their surroundings and know where they're at in the ring doing that. Letting Terence Crawford gain forward momentum is spell disaster. Okay, you don't want Terence Crawford to gain forward momentum. Why don't you want him to gain forward momentum? Because now he's coming forward. He also is great at tracking his man down. Therefore, while you're going backwards, you're not accustomed to moving backwards. Terence Crawford is comfortable coming forward after a guy as well. So now, as he's coming forward, putting pressure on you, he's able to come forward and throw hard shots. Now, you're moving backwards. You definitely can't sit down on your punches while moving backwards. You will have to stop in order to sit down on the punches to try to get him to stop chasing you down. Okay, so that's another thing. You will pretty much handicap yourself if you fight off the back foot against Terence Crawford. So, in essence, what you have is a fighter that would trying to come forward and use pressure against Terence Crawford. He has the great countering and the cat quick ability, and he is great at fighting off the back foot, taking small half steps back and countering. He's cat quick, so he's able to land his punches in those instances. If you decide to stand on the outside, you have all of those other things to deal with that I spoke about. If you get on your back foot and try to move, now your foot spacing is not going to be proper. You're not going to be aware of your surroundings because you're not used to doing that, and you might walk yourself into a corner, which also will spell disaster. So at some point, what people have to realize is Terence Crawford being a read and react fighter, he's not coming into the ring with a full game plan of how he wants to fight like Errol Spence does. Terence Crawford comes in with an objective, and that's to win the fight. He will have small things that he wants to do during the fight, like when he spoke about he wanted to take Errol Spence's jab away. He will try to take away your best weapon, like Floyd would try to take away your best weapon, and then exploit all of your weaknesses and all of your errors that you make. So with that being said, if Spence tries to fight on the outside, he's still going to deal with a different set of problems. So sure, the fight might not look like it looked the last time, but in the end, at some point, you're going to have to deal with the fact that this guy just has a skill set that you just do not have an answer for. And this is the history of boxing. We've seen guys that went up against other fighters that just was a total nightmare for them stylistically, and it really was nothing they can do about it. Sure, you can put up better resistance in a rematch, but I'm speaking as far as the outcome of the fight. The second fight, I see ending the same. It could look different and look a little bit more competitive than in earlier. You see what I'm saying? Or it could look just as one-sided and end later. We just don't know. But my prediction for the fight is the same. Some way, shape, or form, Terence Crawford stops Errol Spence. And I appreciate Errol Spence for taking the rematch. You got to have one big set of balls to jump in the ring and fight a guy in a rematch after he totally dominated you the way he did before, and you going right back into it with no tune-up again. And I commend you. But I have to call it like I see it. I can't see a scenario where Errol Spence wins this fight. Terence Crawford wins this fight by knockout again, and I don't know how or at what point it happens, but I know it's coming. I want to thank y'all for tuning in to another edition of the Hurt Business 101. You know what they say, there's no business like show business, but I say it's no business like the Hurt Business. 1-0-1, done.